Setting up a blog on your website can feel like a pretty daunting task, and especially if you're new to it and are new to a platform like Squarespace. But what if I could help you get started quickly and easily? In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through the simple steps to add a blog to your Squarespace website, understand the basic settings, and get you blogging in no time. But before we dive in, if we haven't met yet, my name is Meg. I'm the founder of Floating Lotus Design, and I'm a Squarespace web designer and SEO specialist. And I'm here to help you elevate your business and your website without the tech overwhelm. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into my demo site and get your blog up and running. All right, so the very first step to getting your blog set up in Squarespace is to add a blog page. So to do that, you want to head over to Pages, and you'll need to decide whether or not you want your blog to show up in your main navigation, or if you want it to just be in your not linked section. For the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to leave it in the not linked section for now, but the steps will be the same regardless. And if you choose to have it in your main navigation later, you can just drag it on up. So I'm going to click plus sign to add a page, and you're going to come down to where it says collections. Now, blogs, your store, portfolio pages, events, videos, courses, these are all what Squarespace calls collection pages. Because if you think about it, they are a main page that holds a collection of other pages underneath of it. So you're going to go and select blog. And it just opens up this basic panel here where you can choose format for how your main entry to your blog will look. It honestly doesn't matter which one you choose because you can change this at any time, but we'll just click this one. And it's just given it a default here, blog 2. I'm just going to name this our how-to blog. And let's just say I'm going to do nothing but tutorial blog posts in here. So I've given it a name. Now that I've come in here, this is opening up the main panel. And what you see here over on the right is your main blog page. So if you were to type in your website domain /blog or in this case, /how-to-blog, this is where it's going to go. And then people can click through into your blog posts. I won't go too in-depth on this, but if you want to change this layout, you can just click Edit. This is called a section. You'll click Edit Section, and then here's where you can choose the number of columns, spacing, the type of image you want to have, the alignment, what metadata, content. So if you want excerpts, do you want the date, anything like that. This is where you set that all up. And then the basic layout. You have a lot of options, but this is where you would set the style of your main blog page. So before we go any further, just want to go through this panel here and explain what you're seeing here. So this is your main blog page, which we just created, and this is the settings wheel for the entire collection, the entire blog collection settings. Below here, you have selling tools, which can be collapsed, but this is where if you wanted to put this blog content behind a paywall and have people pay for that content, you can set that up here. I've done an entirely separate video on how to do that, and I will link that for you. But for this video, we're going to skip that. And then you have your blog content, which is listed down here, all of your individual blog posts. Now, before I get into individual blog posts, let's start at the top level and talk about the settings for your blog collection. Because you will have settings for individual blogs, but you also have settings at the main blog collection level. So if we click the settings wheel here, if you've been in Squarespace at all, these look very similar to all of your other page settings. So you'll have your general, your titles, your URL, whether it's enabled, if you want a password. Thing you can name here is how many posts per page. So on this main page, how many will it be able to show? The max is 20, but you can set that anywhere you want. Then you have SEO, where you would put in your SEO title and description for your main blog. And what's important to point out here is these 3 items for hiding from search results. You can hide all pages in this collection, which you do not want to do, because what that would do is hide all of your blog posts from the search engines, and so they wouldn't be able to find them and index them. So you don't want to do that. There might be a reason you want to do that, depending on, if you have this behind a paywall, you don't want this stuff to be found, et cetera, et cetera. But for a basic blog, you will want to leave this toggled off so that those can be found. However, these next two, category pages and tag pages, I'll be covering categories and tags in just a moment. But when you add a category or a tag, Squarespace creates its own backend page with a URL for each category and tag. You don't want these to be indexed and served up in the search engines, and it can make your Google Search Console stuff get kind of messy and crazy. It doesn't hurt your SEO to turn these off. It's just going to make your life a lot easier. So I recommend toggling these on, and then these individual pages and for tags and categories will not be found in search results, and you don't have to think about them again. As that, it's pretty straightforward. Social image. So if you want to have a main image aside from your logo that would show up when linking to your blog on social media or other places, you can add that here. Otherwise, it will default to whatever you have set up for your site's sharing image. And here, if you had any podcasting feeds, Apple News, or any more custom feeds that you wanted to hook your blog up to, this is where those would get set. And then on the Advanced tab, this is where if you decide at some point to do any kind of CSS or you buy some plugins that you want to use, this is where any kind of code would be added. So let's just focus on categories and tags. And I'll probably do a whole separate video going more in depth on categories and tags, but if you think about it, you can assign a category, multiple categories and or tags to every blog post. And if you think about it like a hierarchy, your categories are your biggest buckets. You don't want to have tons of categories, you 5 to 10. So when you're planning out your blog and what your content's about, you can set it up that way. And then your tags are the more detailed things that kind of roll up under each of those categories. They're not associated with categories necessarily, but think of that you can have multiple categories, multiple tags on a blog post. I think about it like categories can be like, say, if you're a food blogger and you're doing recipes, maybe your categories, you decide to group your content by the meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, or, dessert, something like that. Those would be your main categories. And then your tags could be quick meals. Maybe they're by ingredients, maybe they're by dietary nature. These are much more detailed level items that if you're writing a recipe that on that post, you would have this is a dessert recipe. And the tags are basically could be gluten-free, chocolate, no bake, something like that. So just think of it like that when you're setting these up, that categories are your big buckets, tags are the real detail information. So you want to keep it manageable. Now, here's one of the tricks about Squarespace. It is a little bit funky getting used to how they work, how you set up and work with categories and tags. Now, because we haven't done any yet, it's saying none found. So to be able to add a category, you first have to add one in a blog post, and then it will show up here, and then you can manage it. We'll come back to that in a little bit. And then same with tags. So that's why right now, when you first set up, there isn't going to be anything here. You actually have to create a post, create the tags and assign them there, and then you can move on. And like I said, I'll probably do a separate video about that. If that's of interest to you, drop me a comment. When we have that, we'll hit save. And that kind of is the big overall settings. Now, when you're ready to create a blog post, all you have to do is click add. When it's going to open up the editor, and it's going to allow you to start typing and or copying your content in. The most important thing that I want you to know about this editor is that if you're used to using the Fluid Engine editor and the rest of your Squarespace pages, the collection pages, the blog pages, they do not use Fluid Engine. There's a lot of reasons why. I'm not going to get into it today, but you're not going to have that same grid drop and drag type of experience. These are going to be more like the classic editor. So it's not difficult, but you're just going to have to understand that and know that when you want to add a block, you have to, you'll see there's no add block over here like you do in some of your other pages. It's going to default with this, but if you want to add a block, you have to hit this plus sign and then you can add a block. For example, you want to add an image, you've got to do that. Also, you'll notice again, unlike with the Fluid Engine editor, I can't just make this bigger or smaller. You need to get used to using spacer blocks. So spacer blocks are just that. They create space. And I'm going to add a couple here. And Drag that one over there. You can see, and this is how I can work with spacing my image in this blog post, things like that. I can make it smaller, larger, try and center it a little bit. But it's not hard. It's just different, and it will take just a little bit of getting used to and just playing around with it to kind of manipulate it the way you want. Highly recommend that as you add text and images, you kind of always hit your save here so you don't lose anything. You always have your undo buttons. But other than that, it's pretty much just putting in text, adding your images, etc., etc. You can edit your section here. This is where you would choose your color. So what color theme you're wanting to use. And whatever you kind of set here is going to apply to all your blog posts, by the way. So it's not post by post, it's global. Keep that in mind. But you can do your content width, and that refers to the content width across here. I by default like a medium. It seems to be the most adaptable across different devices and easy to read. So I usually start by the default, but you play around with what you like. You know, narrow, as you'll see, makes it much smaller. If we do wide, it covers a much greater width of your screen. So start with medium. I think that's a good place to go, and go from there. Your text alignment by default, center, you can do it left. Now your meta position, this refers to if you've chosen to have meta data, your date, your author, anything like that. This is where you decide, do I want that to show above the title in my post or below the title? Above the title is usually commonplace that you'll see it. You can tag on whether you want it to show your categories. Again, we don't have them set up yet, so they're not showing, but if you had this titled on, they're going to show up here. And showing the author name, you'll see that pops up here. And you can also show author profile. Now, what I'll show you this is if we scroll down with author profile, you'll see this pops up. So this is the author profile I have set up. So I'm going to do a completely separate video showing you how to create this on your account and with some more important SEO tips around that. So keep that in mind for later. But the one thing I want you to take away from here is that the difference between author name versus author profile. So I'm going to turn it off for now. Remember, these settings are mostly going to be global. So once you change them, they change on all your other blog posts. So just keep that in mind. So you see that the blog title here, this is set up as an H1, as it should be. So whatever you've done your settings for H1 are there. You'll copy and format your text as needed throughout. Again, I don't recommend you type out your blog post directly into Squarespace. Should, God forbid, something happen on your Squarespace side, make sure you are creating and saving your blog posts separately from Squarespace and then copying the content in here. But we'll take a quick peek in right here, site styles, and you'll see where you have your font set, and we do assign styles. And then if we come down to blog post, which is where we are here, we have the title is heading, style heading, size heading 1. You can always customize that, but stick with a heading 1. That's important for SEO. In case you were ever wondering where you can change, if you wanted to change any of that, you can find it in site styles. So you can set how your author profile shows up, the size, everything. You can associate that here. So just a heads up on if you're curious about, I want to change that, how can I change that? The ability to play around with it there. Okay, before we move on to individual blog post settings, I do want to mention here why I'm, not spending a lot of time on the formatting of your blog post here. You have the flexibility to set this up however you want. You can keep it as simple or as complex as you like. But I will mention that I did a completely separate video that I will link up above here, as well as in the description, for how to create a blog post template. So once you get a feel for your blog layout style, if you're going to have like a consistent layout of how you structure your blogs, whether it's like with images and where you place them or how many, anything like that. Like, for example, almost all of my blog posts have a YouTube video in them. So I've created a blog post template that already has the block that I need to embed my video in and in the rough placement where I want it. It has some summary blocks in there because 90% of my blog posts are very much of a similar layout. I create one template blog post that has that format built in so that I don't have to redo it from scratch every single time I do a blog post. So super helpful, really great idea. Be sure to check that one out and will really save a lot of time and stress in the long run. All right. The one quick thing I will mention that is super helpful for blogs and keeping people on your page is adding a summary block. And with the summary block, you can select the page that it's going to pull content from. So for example, you can pull it from this blog page, other content on this blog page, or other collection pages that you may have. But if I choose how to blog, it brings up the blog posts that I have available. And then you can choose if you want any, you know, metadata to be shown, and then you can filter it. So you can either have it show all of the blog posts and I'll just scroll through, or ones that you have mentioned are featured only. And then again, you can sort it by category tag. So say, again, we'll go back to the recipe example. Say this particular recipe you're posting is a dessert recipe. You could have it pull all of, just as other dessert recipes. So it's a good way to be able to serve up additional related content to readers to try and keep them on your blog and on your page and engage with your content. So that's what those are all about. And you'll be able to format this as well. I don't want to spend too much time here, but like on the design, you can say I want, 1, 3, 5, however many. I generally like a nice carousel. You can choose, usually do this. It matches your feature posts. You can decide whether you want it to have the excerpt or not. See, if we take that away, it just leaves the title. If you want an outline, which would show up around the summary block, all those little formatting decisions you've got there, play to your heart's content. But I do recommend a summary block once you've got some content built up. It's a great thing to add. And also add to your template if you do build a template at some point. All right, let's move on. You've added a blog post. Now let's talk about the settings. So we talked about the overall blog collection settings. Now, each one of your blog posts is going to need settings as well. And there are two ways to do that. You can get into these 3 dots here and click settings to bring you into the settings panel. But also, here's a wonderful quick tip. If you are within the editor of your individual blog post and you want to go in and throw in some settings and update some things as you're moving along, you don't have to leave the editor to get there. You just click here on the title and it will open up the settings window. I'm embarrassed to tell you how many years I was blogging in Squarespace before I learned this trick, and I love it. Anyway, settings are very similar to what you've probably seen on other pages, so I'm not going to go into everything here. I'm just going to show you some important highlights. So here you have your content. Again, this is where you're going to have your URL, which is going to be generated automatically. You always want to make sure that you're going to go in and fix your URL to be SEO optimized and appropriate for your blog post. So make sure you always check that, especially if you use a template, because when you duplicate a template, it's going to, again, come up with a random URL that you want to make sure you make it relevant to your blog post. So you'll see here we have author where my name is selected. I'm the only option right now, but if you are working with a team or you have guest blog authors coming on, you can set up multiple authors and then you can select from the drop down the appropriate author to go with this post. So that's important to note. I'm going to skip over options for now because that's what I just want to spend the most time on. So I'm just going to let's jump to SEO. Again, here is where you want to add your SEO title and your SEO description. Please don't leave these to be default. If you leave these like this, Google's going to come up with it. And it may be great and it may suck. If you're taking the time to do keywords and research and strategy for your blog post, you want to make sure that you're putting in SEO optimized titles and descriptions. Your social image. So if you have an image that you want to accompany your posts when you post on social media, this is where you want to throw that. You then have sharing options. So if you're using Squarespace for your email, you have the ability to create an email directly from the post. Most importantly here is social media. This is where you can connect an account. I'm not going to kind of go through that. So you can basically push your blog posts to social media once you hit publish on it. If these are connected, and you enable it, it will send it directly. So, for example, Pinterest. If you have a Pinterest board you want these to go to, connect to your Pinterest account. Then there'll be a toggle over here where it says enabled or disabled. You have to click enabled. You can do it to Facebook, LinkedIn, all of those things. The most important thing I would connect here is your Google Search Console account. And make sure that you click enable on that. And that way, when you publish a blog post, it should trigger and immediately notify Google Search Console that there's new content, there's a new blog post out here, and help it with indexing. I do that on every single one of my blog posts. The key thing to remember is that you click enable for each blog post. So if I click enable on this blog post for, say, Google Search Console on Facebook, that's only going to apply to this blog post. So you have to do this for every single blog post. So remember that. And then location, if you want to have your location information, that metadata associated with your blog post, you can add that in here. So if that local SEO, local things are important to you, you can have that here. Let's go back to options because this is where you're going to do a bulk of the work. So I'm going to skip over here to tags and categories because we've talked about them before. So let's start with categories. Now we don't have any yet, but we were making that recipe before. So this is where I'm going to add some. I've got dinner and you hit enter. You now have a category. Let's do lunch. Let's do breakfast. Let's do dessert. Let's just say those are my 4 main categories. So now they're added and you're all set, right? Okay. Again, blog categories and tags can be a little confusing how Squarespace works for them. You'd be thinking like, oh, I have to now select them, right? No. Once you've added them here, they're added. And if you select them, you can have the option to delete. Follow my lead? Confusing. But to get the hang of it, you get the hang of it. But it's not intuitive right off the bat. If you want to add a category, you can select here. Now, I've got 4 categories. Well, this is going to be a dinner recipe, so I don't need it to be lunch, breakfast, or dessert, so I'm going to hit delete, so only dinner is going to apply to this blog post. Okay, see? Go back in, just dinner. Tags, same idea, but not as kludgy. So tags, let me see. This was going to be, what did I say this was going to be? Dinner, okay. So dinner, this is going to be gluten-free. And I hit enter. Then how about maybe it's vegetarian? Vegetarian, I can spell. Hitting enter. I can do pasta. Maybe it's high protein. Again, I can type. Out here, you can have comments enabled. You can set whether or not you always want them available, or you can disable them after certain times. And then you have the ability to say, well, I want this to be a featured post. So when I was showing you like that summary block, if you only wanted to pull featured posts, you could really would just pull ones with this toggled on. So status, this is where you are going to review, publish, schedule your blog. So as soon as you create a blog post, it's going to be in draft mode. You can then set it to needs review. So maybe you have somebody else on your team that reviews them, or you need approval before you can post something. You can do that. And then publish. If you hit publish, it'll publish this post right now. Or you can hit schedule. And when you schedule, you can schedule it out in the future. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to leave this in draft, but once you hit, you hit schedule, you set date, you hit save, and it'll show up in that sidebar as scheduled. So once you have all your settings taken care of, you can hit save. I'll come back out. And you'll notice here, because I haven't published it, you have this publish button within the post. So if you have all of your settings ready to go and you're just ready to have them published, you can hit publish from here, or you can schedule it from here. So you have some options. But as long as it's in draft mode, you will see over here that it says draft. Now you're probably wondering, okay, there's a picture here and there's no picture here. Where do I add that? Well, we go back into settings, and this is what we usually call your feature image. So I'm going to close this for a second. So see this image here, that's considered your feature image. That's where that's going to pull from. So that is right here at the beginning in content. This is where you would upload your image. And that's what's going to show up here in this block. And that's going to show up anywhere you use a summary block for your posts. And you'll notice here, my tags have shown up. And because I have this set to have categories up here, it's showing up here. Again, you can change that. You can have it all show up down here. You can have none of these things show up. You can design it however you like. Let's go back up to our main blog page settings. And if you remember when we were down here in advanced, we had the manage categories and manage tags. So now that we have some published posts with tags and categories assigned, look, hey, they show up there now. Remember it was empty before? So this is where you can make changes to these if you want. So for example, if I select breakfast, it gives me the option to delete it or edit it. You can also merge. So say, for example, you wanted to combine anything that's with dessert under dinner. So if you select more than one category, it gives you the option to merge them and you can call it a new category. And that's it. You're not adding categories here. It's literally just where you can manage them. And with tags, you can select more than one here. Instead of boxes, there's just these buttons, but it's the same thing. You can just X them out here and get rid of them. This could just be a little bit more streamlined for sure. And this is just where you can edit them or merge them, or, you can filter on things. That's kind of how they work. A little bit kludgy. Again, I think the managing is not quite so kludgy. I think it's really more in the individual blog settings when you're adding categories, like it's going to default. And then you actually kind of like deselect the ones that don't apply. This is particularly true if you do use like a template and you maybe set up some like standard stuff. It's going to copy over what was on that blog post and you'll have to go in and adjust it. So just keep that in mind. But that's really all there is to it, just getting a basic blog page up and going and getting some blog posts out there and creating content. So if you just follow these steps, you can add a blog page and get some blog posts going in 30 minutes or less, really. And I'll also include a link to my SEO blog post template that I sell on my digital shop. And that is either your choice of a Google Doc based template or Notion based template, all set up with all the information you need to optimize your blog post for SEO, where you can put your keywords. You have a complete checklist of all the things that I've covered here. And it's also conveniently where you can keep copies of your blog post, as I was talking about for keeping them off platform. So if you find that useful and helpful to your blog planning efforts and SEO efforts, be sure to check that out. All right, hopefully after watching that, any fears you may have had about getting started blogging in Squarespace are long gone, and you'll be ready to jump in with both feet. And once you get the basics down like the back of your hand, you can move on to some more advanced concepts in Squarespace blogging, but we'll save those for later. I'll link to the videos that I mentioned in this tutorial down in the description, and probably either up here or on the end screen somewhere as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment down below. And until I see you again, happy blogging!